Why, hello, Ms. Honorable. It's Rebecca Barbish-Levins, and again, the time is now 7:02 p.m. on March 19th. I don't know if we're up to hour 5 or 6 now, but it's a lot. And anyway, I think that we should start this video with a review of the DC Public Service Commission's website on the Consumer Bill of Rights page. Now, I tend to take printouts of things and PDF them because you never know. And so on the left here we have the page that was there as of December 12th, 2025, which is the day that OPC submitted the brief sandbagging me. And on the right here we have one that I printed out this week on March 15th, 2026. Now, I was shocked to find that the website had been updated. And for anybody who lives in Washington, D.C., to have a government agency update their website is like a really rare thing. And this update is spectacularly rare. So the old website says that the Consumer Bill of Rights, which is 15 DCMR 300, at sequence, and it is an important binding document that defines the relationship and responsibilities of utility service providers and consumers. It is designed for residential consumers and was adopted to promote administrative efficiency and uniformity. It also establishes consumer protection laws for enforcement authority to ensure district residents are adequately protected. The CBOR covers the procedures and steps consumers and providers must follow when it comes to billing, consumer inquiries, and informal/formal complaints. So this is what the website has been since I filed my original complaint with the Commission in October of 2024. And lo and behold, this week, all of that language was gone, and it just says that this is the primary rights and responsibilities of a district utility customer. It doesn't say anything about the utilities themselves, which is crazy, and that you have a right to receive a clear, accurate bill at least once during each billing cycle. So that's pretty weird that they would take out all of these things that talk about the utilities responsibilities. And then they go into fair rules for security deposits, unfair disconnects, and resolving disputes and complaints. Now, for resolving disputes and complaints, it's fascinating because now it says that the first step should always be to contact the utility to attempt a resolution. And then it says you have the right to contact DCPSC. After that, and that's the website now. Now, previously, the second page talked about this disconnection and reconnection of services. And fascinating that they took this part out because it says that a utility cannot disconnect residential service unless a disconnection notice has been sent to consumers at the billing address by either first-class mail or other digital means at least 15 days prior to the date of the proposed disconnection. That's not there anymore, which is fascinating because you would think that we would want to protect people who are facing a disconnection of service. I don't know, those seem like the people that the Office of Consumer Services at the DC Public Service Commission should be looking out for, not protecting Pepco's rights to jam disconnects down unsuspecting customers' throats. Also, customer inquiries and complaints on the old site. If a complaint cannot be resolved between the consumer and the utility must inform the consumer of the right to contact DCPSC for resolution and advise the consumer of the availability of the Office of People's Counsel to assist in resolving a dispute before the DCPSC. None of that language is there anymore. It's crazy. And then there's formal hearing procedures. A formal hearing will, if appropriate, be scheduled 45 days after the filing of a complaint response. The DCPSC, Office of Consumer Services, will notify consumers at least 14 days prior to the hearing date unless the parties agree to a shorter time. Now that's pretty fascinating because my formal hearing case was filed on February 25th, 2025. Pepco got an extension, so their answer was submitted on March 25th, 2025. And I still haven't had a hearing. The hearing officer issued an order 10 days ago dismissing my complaints. I just filed a petition for review because the Office of Pepco's Counsel, Office of the People's Counsel, wasn't going to put one in that represented my interest. And then finally over here is the background that it was created in 1979, and the CBOR, the Consumer Bill of Rights, establishes the rights and responsibilities of consumers as well as enforcement authority to ensure district residents are adequately protected. You know, because why would we want to tell people that anymore? So they took all of this highlighted language out, which is just insane to me. So thankfully, I captured it before they did that. And so moving on. Let's see. No, we don't want to save that. That's fine. And no. Okay, so we're going back to Pepco's responses to OPC's data requests. This is data request 1-18. Has to do with internal communications, case notes, or adjustment logs from the Green Power Connection team, the Greedy Power Company team, customer service, special investigations, or any other internal units referencing manual adjustments or bill rate calculations to my account from May 2024 to present. Notably, the documentation is not complete, but what they did give me is pretty telling. And for those of you who are just joining in, this is my original complaint that I filed on October 2nd, 2024. And talk about how Pepco had basically stolen 1,000 kilowatt hours from us after issuing authorization to operate over 2 months. And so the usage data on second billing cycle on August 25th, and again on August 28th, they sent an interval restart on the 27th, and that replaced our data with falsified data on the portal. So originally we had a credit of 537.62 kilowatt hours, and Pepco changed that to 53.92 kilowatt hours using a repeating pattern that repeated in an hourly pattern every 7 days of the billing cycle. That is because when Pepco programmed my meter for net energy on June 25th, 2024, they reduced the quote-unquote register readings by a factor of 10. So when they issued authorization to operate, they wanted, this was the interval total before, and so instead of figuring out why they were different, they said, oh, well, let's just replace the intervals and reduce them to be this 53.92. And of course, nobody told me that. Fascinating. And then for September, I knew I didn't have the data from before and after. After it was 50 kilowatt hours, but I knew we were missing around 500. And lo and behold, in October, they maintained these reduced values, and they reduced our July bill for reasons unknown. And I kept fighting, and finally in November, on November 21st, 2024, they did restore these values. Nobody's ever told me why the first revision was to maintain and basically continue trying to steal solar energy, because then they issued an October bill that went, I don't think I can even see over there because it's too dark, but it was 262 credit on the portal, and they gave me 29 in credit on the bill. So let's now go to, these are some great stuff. This is fascinating because this is the internal emails. Fascinating here. All right. Okay. Oh, come on. Big window. All right. And so question 18 is this internal communications. The first part of this are my emails to GPC South, the Greedy Power Company South, and the Greedy Power Company billing mailbox. Telling them we went over these earlier. This is after they had I reduced the July bill, and nobody would respond to me. Okay, so now we're getting into, these are the Friday, October 4th. So this is 2 days after I, filed my complaint. And so this is, here, let's start at the bottom. I believe this is Linda Brown from Escalated Investigations sending this email that they have, this complaint. And it says that the meter was exchanged for net on 5/22/24, but that's not actually correct. It was exchanged because there was a bad display, and it was on May 21st, not on May 22nd. The permission to operate date is correct. But they asked them to review the following two bills. And it says the two bills reflect meter reading data as either unavailable or the difference between the two reads do not match the difference printed on the bill. That would be a sum check error because the numbers didn't add up. And so this email says that the meter exchange bill seems to be in line, and then my bill for September looks fine. The August bill here just had this start date as unavailable, so that's really just the carryover of this end date from July. Now, we don't know why they did not address the actual issues raised in my complaint. Nobody will tell me. And then whoever received this, yes, this is Natia Joyce, as we talked about earlier, because she is right here making these edits in SAP. She says that she attempted to cancel and rebuild the account because she entered the actual readings obtained from IEE, that's Itron Enterprise Edition, that is the meter data management system that when your meter data transmits, it first goes to UIQ, which is Utility IQ, and that is the head-end system that receives the data from the meter over the air, and then the UIQ data gets populated into the Itron database, and Itron is where the validation, estimation, and editing occurs on your account. And so she entered the readings, so SAP did not have the readings in their system, and then she tries to rebuild, but it doesn't work. So she's going to reach out to AT, and AT is Advanced Technology, and so she's going to see if this is a print issue, and she'll advise when she gets the information. And then she says that she's able to rebuild the account, and that's the end of it. So nobody ever investigated my actual complaint in October. 2 days later, instead, they changed the bill, and while Nadia Joyce was at it, somebody told her to disable the interval readings on my account and force the register. And the interval readings are like the hourly slices. So if you think of the day as a pie, and there's 24 slices in the pie, the 24 slices should equal the whole pie. So midnight reading to midnight reading, difference should be the same as the 24 hourly readings total. And they just disabled the hourly readings because the numbers weren't adding up. That's, because why be accurate? It's just billing. And so now this is in November, and this is after after the October bill issued with the portal showing that I had a 262 kilowatt hour credit, and they only credited me with 29 on the bill. So we'll go backwards on this because that's good, because they end up rebilling everything on the 21st. And on the 21st, when they rebill, they forced it into register readings again. And in case you didn't listen to all 5 hours that I've been talking earlier today, so this is where, and I don't think Nadia Joyce did this intentionally. I think she's just following protocol. So just to be absolutely clear, because Pepco keeps their different employees siloed. So the people who are working on something only see their worldview, right? And so that allows Pepco to manipulate things without their employees knowing what's going on. So this is 11:15. They're doing some billing, whatever. They didn't issue bills that day, but they were playing around with the bills. They changed my displayed meter reading on my physical meter on the 17th. Then they tried to bill again, and they had a problem that we'll talk about in a minute when we look at the emails, and the numbers didn't work out. So they started a new interval restart going back to July on 11/19. That the interval restart is what results in the repeating patterns on your data. So then they actually have to remove this billing block to get the bills to reprint on November 21st. And this 6/12/2023 was the date that the contract billing block was established on my account. That is actually the day I called to establish service from Texas before we moved back to DC, and service started on July 1st. So that's pretty interesting stuff. Okay, so again, they've redacted people's names, so I'm not sure exactly who's who. I have some idea on these things, but so on the 19th, this is before they run the interval restart for July, because that happened on the 19th that night. And so now this is really interesting. So this team has been working with Nadia on the account. They need more time. Even though this account was not billed on interval billing, they forced it to be register billing, which the bills actually say on their face that they're interval billed. This is very weird. It says we need to make sure we have the right pulse. Well, we have to make sure we have the pulse multiplier issue completely resolved prior to sending the revised bills. Right now, when we review the data in the Itron database, the consumption is a lot lower than the customer's historical usage for the same time last year. And so their AMI's advanced metering infrastructure, those engineers are actively investigating the concern with the pulse multiplier, and we hope to have resolution soon. Now, Pepco doesn't have any approvals, as far as I can find, anywhere at the commission on using these pulse multipliers. And it's fascinating because I don't know if let's see. Now this is the only time I do use my own data from my solar system, and it is just to calculate the percentage increase load from pre-solar. And so you can see, all right, so this is all pre-solar. So the change versus the pre-solar was, 1, because it's the same. Now, when they issued the June 24 bill, it was 120% higher than it was the previous year. And I used, because we were only here part of the month in July 23, so the August 23 data was the 43.48 per day, and that's the highest of the year. So to be conservative, I use that 43.48 for June, July, and August for 2024. That's fascinating because that's 1.20. So 120% higher usage than if you had used our August totals from the year before. July, now that's crazy. It's 180% higher. Why? I don't know. Pepco knows, but September, so August is 132% higher. September is 111% higher. Then October, 137. November, 118. Now get this December one, this 1.02, that's really low comparatively. They set that on, I think it was November 11th. You can see these pings to the meter. So they ping the meter every night at midnight for the registers to get the daily reading. But if you talk to customer service and they ping your meter and get a reading, there's a record in the hourly data But they ping my meter just after midnight when the bill month changes. So it billing cycle ends at midnight, and then sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. they ping it again, and that is actually a firmware script being sent to the meter from Pepco. So they actually are changing these numbers, and the way they're able to do that is they so the meter is it's called Form 2S. I have spent tons and tons of time on this, obviously, because why would anyone in their right mind know all of this if they didn't have to? And so if you're looking at your meter, see this FM2S? That is a residential meter. It is you have 2 lines that are 110 volts each, so you're on 220 service. 240? Anyway, you know what I mean. It doesn't matter, but it's a 2-line service for residential. Oh, 240 volts, there it is. Now, what they're doing is they take this and they tell the meter to think it's a network meter, and that's a commercial meter. And instead of it just having 2 120 volt lines, the commercial meters have a ground line. And so this type of scripting wasn't applied yet, but my meter, since like October 2024, this arrow is always pointing down constantly. And that has to do with, so your voltage comes at your house in a wave, and there's current that comes in a wave. And the up and down arrows have to do with whether the current or the voltage come first. And under residential, they should be the same. And with commercial installations, they will put transformers, CTs and PTs. I don't know much about that stuff, but by telling my meter to think that it's a network meter, it unlocks those multipliers. It's sort of like unlocking the cheat codes. And so what they're able to do is every month they can change those multipliers because they have to keep it seasonal, right? If they were using the same multiplier every month, it would be obvious that it would be a straight line increase. So here, where they go down to 1.02, guess why they did that? Because there was a meter test coming up. And guess what the variance on the meter test for the commission is? 2% accuracy. So by putting this at 1.02, when the commission was here with Pepco and they tested the meter display was within 102% of what it should be. Fascinating that the picture from the meter test and the ping on Pepco's side were not the same. I mean, they should be, right? Because the displayed reading on your meter and Pepco's reading on its side should be the same. When I brought this up to the hearing officer at the pre-hearing conference on April 8th, 2025, he told me, well, they're within 2% of each other. That's not how this works, right? So the meter test just tests to see if your meter can accurately measure the voltage. It doesn't have anything to do with the displayed number, and so that does not actually account for that. I think they set that at like November 11th, and then right around January 9th, so partway through, so this is the beginning date, they changed it up again. So here we're at 9%, then 12, then 15, 115. April was when we were at Disney for spring break, but we were gone for a week. So we should only be at 75% of usage historically. But the really interesting part of all this is when this conversation was happening in that email, and they say my usage was lower than the previous year. Well, it's higher than the previous year in reality. My suspicion is that Pepco is artificially inflating those numbers for the estimation system. So whichever engineer looked at that, they're used. So if the engineers could tell that everything was inflated, they would know, and somebody would say, "Oh my gosh, this is wrong." But the baseline, like, look at this, is crazy. If you do the running average for this whole period, it's 122%. Now, if you do from August of 24 to February 26, we're right at 119%. And this is from January 25 bill through February 26. So probability and statistics, you don't have numbers that are just like this aligned. That's not a naturally occurring pattern. And of course, Pepco won't explain any of this. If anybody wants to know how to calculate this themselves, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to share with you. And again, I'm not using my solar in any way for my billing complaint against Pepco. I am just using it for this analysis to see these trends because it's crazy. And then they look at this in July of this year, 148% of my pre-solar load. That's crazy. And this December, that's 1.02. Here, if we look in December this year, it's at 119. So those like seasonal weather would not make that big of a swing. And so they're definitely manipulating something here. I don't know exactly which one how this works, but these are my predictions. And okay, so we're gonna go back now. So this is what this person's saying, that the consumption's a lot lower than the historical usage. Apologize for the delay, blah, 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 blah. And this is on Monday, November 18th. They are rebilling me on the 18th. They're asking here if I'm being rebilled using the register reads, which are the daily reads that Pepco claims cannot be changed, even though they can. So, for those of you just tuning in, hang on. This is, okay, the interval and the register. Okay, so Pepco tells you that the register can't be changed, the midnight reading. Now, that used to be true, but right here in Itron, which is their meter data management system, where is it? Editing register reads. I don't even think their employees know this because a lot of the employees say that the register reads cannot be changed. But you can see right here that they can be. So again, this is a siloed environment where the different employees don't know what the other employees know. And hopefully we're going to tear down those walls with this video series so that, you know, the people working at Pepco, I can't imagine you're all wanting to commit billing fraud, but right now you're complicit and you're helping Pepco do it. Okay, so let's go back here. And so they're asking, are you using register reads or are we leaving on interval and correcting the intervals? And intervals are the total hourly. So on your bill, if you see the meter readings say that they are for informational purposes only. And the total for the bill for use or excess generation, that is the total, the summation of the intervals. And I know this is a lot of deep stuff, but I'm happy to explain should anybody want to know, because nobody at the Office of People's Counsel or the Public Service Commission, other than Margaret Moskowitz, she did want to know, but then they silenced her. Okay, so they're going to use the MDUS. I can't remember what that stands for, but that's the rebilling stuff. Okay, so then, Monday, November 18th, they had, the day before was when they changed the meter reading displayed on my meter. And here they're saying that the meter was reprogrammed and they want to have the account, reverse to register and rebuild. They do that, but it didn't work, so they had to go back to the, no. They had it, sorry. They had it interval and then they switched back to registers because of what we're going to see in a minute, that the intervals were not aligning as they should. So, okay, this is things are not adding up. Somebody says this is how the intervals returned. And is that this? Oh, here. Okay. So see, this is really crazy because this 1235 and this 1380, those were the original intervals on my bills. This 137 was on the bill originally. Originally, this said 0, this said 0, and this said unavailable. And then on October 4th, when they pushed through the revised billing, they manually updated the June 25th readings, but they didn't use the midnight June 25th. They actually used the midnight June 26th readings. And that is because they had reduced the intervals when they reprogrammed the meter. I mean, this stuff's like just crazy, because how are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Why? To make more money, of course. This is all about siphoning solar energy, I believe, because they haven't fixed it, and nobody at the commission or the Office of the People's Counsel will even ask them why this happened. So you can see here, this is the end of the billing period on June 25th, my last pre-solar bill. They hit the meter at 12:55 a.m. with a new script, and that was configured basically as an automated thing. So this is the first billing period after you get authorization to install. Then somebody pings the meter at 6:20 on June 25th at 2:11, and look, it's already down by a factor of 10. And that is right when they start registering my solar reads. That is the day that my solar got installed, before the electrical inspection happened, and that's pretty crazy. But okay, so this comes through after they said they fixed everything, which is crazy because these are still reduced by 10, a factor of 10. And that is because when they went to fix it, they assumed that the problem was with these register readings, or the interval readings. And so they forced all of these numbers to be reduced by a factor of 10 to match these numbers. But, after this person talks about the usage up above being off from the previous year, somebody, I think, realized what was going on and they fixed it, but that's never discussed in these documents because heaven forbid somebody in the Greedy Power Company, GPC billing team, or escalated investigations were to admit what had happened, because then, people would call them out for the billing fraud. And, if they're not siphoning off solar energy, they're not making as much in profits. Okay, but it's crazy because it says your bill is the total of all the hourly intervals recorded during your billing period. The rate schedule for residential billing says that Pepco has to do a meter reading, which is the register readings, and they have to read that register to the nearest constant, the nearest multiple of the meter constant. And on the Aclara meter that they use for residential purposes, that is 10 watt hours. So they're not actually billing according to their tariff, which is literally the definition of billing fraud, and it is illegal for them to charge more or less than the established rates. So if they are changing your total usage, either up or down, they are billing for more than the established rate. And moving on, let's see. This is, if they're running the bills, they're running into problems. And then, so here's where somebody says, the interval data under some program ID was inaccurate due to the discrepancy of the pulse multipliers, and the register data was confirmed to be correct. Now that is not true, because register data is what they reduced by a factor of 10 when they reprogrammed my meter. And now that they're reconfigured, they should match up for future billing cycles. If you ever look at Pepco's correspondence, it never says that they're right. It says that they will align now or they'll match up, but never that they're correct. Little wordplay that they do. And this is somebody else basically asking the same question because we're going backwards in time. Now here, they say that they've discovered there's an issue with the program script, and that caused a discrepancy between the meter's output pulse multiplier versus the pulse multiplier in IEE. And so they say that's explaining this discrepancy between the UIQ database, which is the utility IQ. That's the first database that the meter data comes into. And then, so the UIQ data is not reduced by a factor of 10. It's at 100%. But then when they apply their, I don't know, fraud scheme, whatever you want to call it, to populate this next database, they reduce the readings by a factor of 10. Or, in my billing, with August and September, the Itron database, which is would produce what you see on the portal, they were at 100% until the bill process. And during the bill rendering process, they reduced those readings by a factor of 10. And so then they say that they can confirm that the register data in both platforms does line up and is correct. Now that's not true. So basically what they're saying is the daily thing that's supposed to be, you can't change at all, it was reduced by a factor of 10 in both of these databases. The second level database, the interval data was reduced by a factor of 10. So everybody's assuming that the raw data from the meter is coming through wrong, but that's not true. So their first attempt to fix this is they try to make this number smaller, and then they run into a problem and they finally figure it out, later in the week, after that July bill we just looked at reran. I mean, it's really crazy. So here they're going to say we've reprogrammed the meter to a different program ID without the data reset for billing purposes. I think that this is probably no, that's not when they do that. They do the interval restart the next day. Let's see. Oh, and then this is talking about how, the portal says negative 262. They billed me for negative 29. Blah, blah, blah. They're asking AT to look into this issue. AT is like the Wizard of Oz, the Wizard of Fraud. They're the ones that put in the manipulations on that utility IQ level. And I don't think that the employees necessarily know that the scripts that they're pushing out to the meter are causing these different inflation ratios, because it's all computer generated, right? Somebody wrote a program that looks at your historical usage, and then they have to keep that balance, right? Because they want that running total to be at whatever it was, 119%. So they tweak it every month. I mean, it's really crazy. But they say that the meter's not coded as interval billed, and they're like, what's going on here? Now here it says no sum check coding at SAP. Now that means that a sum check is making sure the slices of the pie add up to the whole pie. So the 24 hours, those intervals, the total of those should equal the difference between the midnight reads. And my meter did not have sum check coding. And that's because the billing back office disabled the interval register, and the interval billing determinants were not used or requested. Now, Mr. Adayamo keeps saying that's Pepco's PHI, Pepco Holdings Inc.'s Assistant General Counsel. He keeps saying that there was a communication issue with the meter. There was no communication issue. If there had been, the interval data wouldn't have been on the portal, but it was. So basically, on October 4th, right here, they disabled it. That's 2 days after my complaint was filed. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, Pepco did make it up, get it? My bills. Because who cares about accurate billing of your customers? And you can steal from them. And so this is the SAP screen that they even put in here. You can see that this is the 6/25/24. That's the day they reprogrammed my meter for net. And then right here, this is Natia Joyce again, and it changes this field because that register is not relevant to billing. I mean, and like nobody would know any of this was happening because it's all behind the scenes and nobody told me any of this, right? I had to go through these documents and spend countless hours reverse engineering all of this. And that's why I'm sharing it with everybody else, and especially you, Ms. Honorable, because why is Pepco doing this? And why aren't they telling me what's really going on with my account? And, you know, you guys just got in a lot of trouble a couple of years ago for your Con Ed scheme where you were paying off the Illinois, was it the Speaker of the House? Madigan, maybe? And your CEO there went to jail. Her name is Ann, too. Much like Ann Bancroft at PHI's general counsel, who knows about the billing fraud and doesn't care. So let's see. Oh, well, that's weird. Rendering. Why is that doing that? Huh. Okay. Well, actually, it's probably good timing because I do believe that my dinner is done being cooked. And I will leave it at that for now, and we will pick up here later. Although I did stay up all night last night recording videos because my petition for review was due today, and I had to write that myself as well because the Office of the People's Counsel, who are supposed to be my attorneys, are actively colluding with Pepco to screw my case. Anyway, so I will be back shortly.